Yes. All right.
So now we are recording. We're in. And I am so happy to have you back on the Ra INtuition Brunch Podcast. And we're going to have some nice tunes in the background, compliment of DJ Razia. That's what it's going to be today. But so Jen, we have done a lot of podcasts on the Anchor platform. And so now we're going to try to do some video and give some face to the voice and try to get on different platforms and stuff. So I'm going to have you reintroduce yourself.
All right. Well, I'm Jen. The last name is pronounced Seep. Like the Z doesn't even exist. Just forget that it's there. And I'm a author, tarot reader, a belly dancer, a kind of jack of all trades, master of none. So, but on your podcast, I talk about tarot cards. So,
yes, we talk a lot about tarot, and then comparing them to the archetypal properties of the Zodiac and the planetary archetypes. And, you know, we're probably going to touch on the house archetypes, which we haven't done that. We haven't talked about the houses at all. So that should be fun. How's the background music? Are you enjoying it?
It's nice and ambient from over here. So
the youngest DJ in history.
Yes.
So yes, and I'm Ra. This is my podcast that I share with lovely people to just share and talk about different we talk a lot about philosophy around divination and spirituality, and I think that's really where I'm at too, is just, you know, kind of talking about the philosophies behind them and even the ethical, you know, values of it, or different values. But it is February and Valentine's Day I don't know who all celebrates Valentine's Day. What other countries celebrate Valentine's Day? Is it just US?
I think it's pretty much just a greeting card US holiday, but it is also one of the high holy chocolate holidays. So it's very important in my life.
I agree with that. I definitely better be getting some dark midnight chocolate, good quality, and flowers, maybe chocolate flowers. That would be nice. Yeah, chocolate flowers, I'm down. So that's happening for sure. And I think that in astrology, there's actually a Valentine's Day version in astrology. So when Venus and Jupiter conjunct, it's supposed to be the most romantic day of the year, which is within the next couple of days. It's pretty close. Like right now, it would be considered a conjunction. So it's like the most romantic week of the year. But it's also in Aquarius though, and Aquarius is not the most romantic sign in traditional romantic archetypal properties. But you know, for some people who have more strong Aquarius, that could be your flavor. That could be your yum, you know. So so that's a thing this week, because like all the planets are in Aquarius. I mean, not all of them, but like a very big chunk of them. There is 6 planets on tomorrow there's 6 planets, because we're waiting for the moon to get in there, but everybody else is already at the party. We're just waiting for the moon. So very, very strong.
Is it always the case that Jupiter and Venus conjunct so close to what we traditionally see as Valentine's Day?
I do not think so, because Venus stays, and this was just something I recently started paying attention to, because I never thought about like an astrological Valentine's Day till recently. But Venus usually is pretty close to the sun. So they do retrograde, so they'll get away from it and come back, you know. So, and the sun does not retrograde. But Jupiter is in the same sign for a year. at a time. So it's a 12-year cycle. It does retrograde and come back out, but for the most part, this is a Jupiter in Aquarius year. We're going to go into Pisces a little bit and then come back out. But for the most part, the whole year, Jupiter will be in Aquarius. And Venus is only in Aquarius around this time that the sun is in Aquarius, which is this time of year. So, I don't know if that was kind of long, but
no, I'm just curious because we wonder sometimes where the idea for these holiday dates, and I take it back, I don't think Valentine's Day is strictly a greeting card holiday because there is a Saint Valentine.
yes.
So I wonder if like the Saint Valentine's Day is once again another way that the Holy Roman Empire decided they were going to snatch up a pagan identity for a date.
Yes. Yeah. And it is, a lot of holidays do line up like that with astrological dates, like the winter solstice and like just like all kinds of different stuff. There is a lot of, or just the sun season tends to kind of represent some of that. But I would say Valentine's Day, I was kind of looking for correlations and I didn't find a whole lot other than the Jupiter and Venus conjunction. And that doesn't happen every year. That's a special this year during this time. It happens every year, just not necessarily during February. So, you know, next year it'll happen a little bit later and so on and so forth. Where in a couple years it'll be like in the summer, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, I don't know if that was too long of an explanation and we're like rambling on about it, but I think it's fascinating to check all that stuff out because there is always a lot of, not always, but a lot of pagan influence on our holiday calendar.
Yes, and that's why it's like, that's so curious to me when those things kind of align and work out. So
yeah, this is just an awesome. It's a romantic week if you find Aquarian, humanitarian ideals romantic, which I kind of do. Like that very disconnected, you know, Aquarius is a very caring, but it's more of on a macro level. And sometimes Aquarius can have a harder time being sympathetic to the she dropped her apple, she said. She's like, you. So so the Aquarius archetype definitely can get away from all of that. Do you want to say hi real quick? You want to say hi? Say hi. Say hello. Say hello. My cucumber. Say hi. She's enjoying that.
she's like, sure, whatever.
Yeah, so sometimes, you know, the more very personal interactions that like, you know, Leo or Libra would be more keen to, right?
Mm-hmm.
Aquarius tends to be like, but the big picture. It's more, Aquarius is more willing to sacrifice, like collateral damage type of view, you know, is more Aquarius's thing sometimes. But that doesn't mean that Aquarius is always a jerk. They're just usually looking to evolve the entire humanity to another level. Like what's going to get us to the next level? Maybe your feelings about that don't really matter right at this moment because there's a bigger picture involved. Right. And so some people don't find that the most romantic of energies. However, you could definitely find that romantic if you're, you know, doing society humanitarian work with a partner and you guys are like using that as an outlet to do something romantic together. There's lots of different ways you could go about that. And so anyways, we talking about Venus because Venus is associated with romance and love and all of those things. And it's when you're talking to an astrologer about love compatibility and all of that, we definitely look to Venus to see like what your love language is and what you might be interested in as far as how you want to give and receive like kind of the pleasures of life. I would say Venus is very much into the pleasures of this world and how you want to express that and receive it back. Have you looked into the card for that kind of represents the Venusian energy, or is there a couple of them?
There's actually probably quite a few, and I haven't really looked into it, but there's a few that pop up in my head, and there's one other one that I'm like currently flipping through my cards for because I was like, oh, that's a good one too. I should have picked that one out. I did pick out kind of a stack of them because I was like, I can't pick just one. And maybe that's because there's multitude of them.
Right, because there's so many love languages, right?
Yes, and not only that, but like there's kind of there's different ways of looking, I think, at Venus as well. So I'm probably not going to find it within a reasonable amount of time here. I've got what I'm looking for is the 9 of coins, because that is very representative of like, yeah, somehow I went through the whole thing and didn't find that one at all. But anyway, the 9 of coins is the one that I was going to talk about because it is more like the luxury aspect of Venus that kind of, yes, it's about love, but it's a lot about self-love and recognizing your own successes and recognizing your self-worth and giving yourself permission, yes, to like be proud of yourself and love yourself. So, but I know that the one that everyone is probably thinking is totally Venus in the tarot deck is the Empress. Because, and even in a standard, I should say a more standard deck than this one, I'm playing with this one this month. It's the Tarot of the Divine, and it's inspired by like folklore and legends from around the world and a bunch of different cultures. So
I love that deck, by the way. I've been watching your YouTube videos and I love the folklore ones. I'm a big fan of Women Who Run with the Wolves by Dr. Estes. I'm going to destroy her name, but I think it's Dr. Estes, right? And so I'm obsessed and I love applying all of those stories that are so rich with like knowledge and breaking them down into, you know, practical applications in our daily life.
Yes.
Anyway.
And I definitely, I have like so many cards pulled out for this love language thing. But so the Empress is typically in the Rider-Waite deck, she's depicted in this very abundant garden, and the symbol of Venus is somewhere on the card. So it's either on like a shield that's next to her or on her pillows, sometimes on her dress itself. So it is the archetype of Venus in the tarot deck, without a doubt. But there's lots of other cards that to me kind of also have that energy, that love energy, especially when it comes to like the different languages of love. And the other one that I like is I like to call it the happily ever after card. It's 10 of cups, and it's usually depicted with a family or a couple, and there's like a rainbow and the cups are kind of in the rainbow. There's this little village in the background. It's just the most idealistic happily ever after imagery for this card. And yeah, go ahead.
No, I really like that. And then I almost want to say, you know, because I wanted to kind of bring in the houses too, is that card is maybe more of like a 7th house card, because the 7th house represents contracts and partnership. Either it can be business or marriage, because, you know, technically marriage is is kind of traditionally a business agreement.
Yes.
She doesn't like that. She's like, no, love
like,
is for love. This is my Venus in Pisces. She's like, no, we get married for love. That's why she's disagreeing. I don't know. I just make up stuff that she's saying all the time to entertain myself. But anyway, so I was trying to look up if it could figure it out, but this is my Venus card. So I have this cool astrology deck that I use in my readings to like help guide me through someone's chart. And it says Venus is the part of you that desires beauty, success, indulgence, and values. And so
That big time 9 of coins energy on that. Yeah.
Yeah, so tell me about the 9 of coins if you pull that in like a relationship reading.
So in any reading, what the 9 of coins usually is meant to represent is success and abundance, and kind of acknowledging that and taking the time to go, okay, I'm just going to step back and appreciate what I have. And I think in a relationship reading, what it usually means is, if like you're concerned that your relationship may not be exactly what you want it to be, look at it for what it is and appreciate it for what it is. That's the bigger picture of it. Again, it's not as pretty as like the happily ever after card, which is like, yes, everything is beautiful and perfect. It's more like, it may not be a storybook, but look at how successful it is. Look how beautiful it is from a more practical standpoint.
Yeah, and I think we kind of touched on that. I've been thinking about that a lot, and I really want to do like a series on astrology. I don't want to denounce astrologers, because I have learned all of my information that I have learned because I went and studied multiple different astrologers, right? But there is who do not do what I'm about to say, but there is a lot of pop culture astrology that shows, they talk about it in a very simplistic way because astrology is so complicated. And they'll say, the sun sign, your sun sign doesn't get along with this sun sign, so that doesn't work. And that's not how compatibility works. That's not how relationships work. That's not how people are, because your sun is literally probably less than 1%, like less than 1% of your personality, in my opinion, maybe 5%. I don't know how to do percentages, but we're so multidimensional. I don't think you could even put us into a percentage as far as like the different aspects. And then it's different depending on what's going on, like what season you're going through, or, what life cycle you're going through. And so those things are going to change and evolve, and we're going to learn lessons, and we're going to go through different things. So to judge someone compatibility wise based on their sun sign is, to me, the equivalent of like racism, gender stereotypes. Like I'm so against that. And it's very, like, I had a friend come and tell me one time, she was like, I'm dating this girl, and I've been trying to tell her, about my chart, and I've been trying to tell her, like, this is the way I am this way or something. And the girl was like, I'm not interested in that or whatever. And so to her, that was like, she was trying to say like, well, I'm very interested in this, and this is important, and I believe in this. And it was creating a huge rift in their relationship. And astrology should not be doing that to your relationship. I mean, it is, I would say, if it's something that's important to you, like I had a previous relationship where it was something that was important to me, and they kind of weren't they kind of were like, oh, that's not logical, or that's kind of silly. They kind of looked at it like it was silly, or maybe looked down on me for doing it. And then maybe that's not a good fit for you. I definitely wouldn't compromise something to make someone else more comfortable, which was something I kind of did for a while. Like I would avoid doing some of the things I enjoyed doing because it made someone else more comfortable, right? And that was a learning lesson I had to go through, because then it made me mentally sick not having like my outlets, right? Like whatever you do, whether it's going, exercising or whatever, it just made me like depressed because I wasn't doing what I wanted to do. And avoiding that. But astrology is definitely not something that I would shove down your partner's throat as something that they have to do in order to understand you, or they have to learn this in order to like be with you. I mean, I guess you could have that, but I just don't think that that's a healthy or realistic thing. Like you don't really need astrology. You don't really need tarot. You don't really need divination. If it's something, and you really I wouldn't use it to determine whether or not you would be with someone. I wouldn't use it to determine any of those things. You can use it as a practical tool to discuss things. Like I would say, well, your Venus is in, like I have Venus in Cancer, and I very much resonate with having Venus in Cancer. I want, my love language is a lot about, comfort, emotionally comforting and wanting to be comforting, being very emotionally in tune with those that I love, and, comfort in general, because Venusian is also about just pleasures, right? And so just being cozy and cuddled up at home is very much a love language for me, right? That's not all of my interests or all of what I want to do. So you can look at that and say, I resonate with this, and look at theirs and say, do you resonate with yours? You can have a discussion about how your relationship wants to go in a very practical and healthy way, as opposed to and saying, is this something how you want to be? Sometimes there's a negative thing that you don't like, and you're like, well, I'll work on not doing that, or I don't, it's a way to have conversations about very complicated and very like, what's the word I'm looking for? But yeah, they are complicated and just difficult conversations to have about feelings. And we assume a lot that other people are like us, but they're not, right?
Right.
I think we take for granted the dimensions and the different what's going on with people, and astrology really opens that window to say, oh wow, like you are very different than me in this area, and maybe I should acknowledge that you just have a different love language, because if my sign as a Cancer, if I'm not being like emotionally supported, right, I could view that as you don't love me. I could be like, you don't love me because you're not emotionally supporting me. You're not, you're not being sensitive to my feelings. So like, that means you don't love me. But that's not how not everybody's in tune with that. And not everybody expresses love that way. And so learning that and learning how to, look at your own chart and say, okay, this does resonate. And then applying that to your life in a way where I'm like, I can work on this area, or I can embrace that this is how I am and not everybody else is like that. And just having I feel like I kind of went on a tangent about that, or was repetitive a bit, but I think that I feel very strongly. Yeah, she's playing with them in the background.
I'm just watching what she's doing in the background. I'm like,
yeah.
She knows.
So it's nice because
she's busted.
I can watch her from here, which is nice, from the little camera. You should see me like during the podcast. I'm just like running around, like chasing her usually, or just like, I don't know. But are you gonna get down? She's just like naked. Maybe I should have put clothes on her for the recording. Don't fall down. That would be bad for camera time, because we only have like 2 minutes left. But I have so much to say, and I think I'm gonna make like a whole series about that. About just how relationships are so, because if you're doing a reading how do you do a reading for people with relationships? If I come to you and I'm like, my relationship is garbage, what's going on, what's going to happen, or whatever, I don't know, my relationship's perfect, and then you pull the Tower card, I don't know, like, how does
So I will start with saying there are multitudes of spreads for the tarot deck to use in relationship readings. So it really depends on what the situation is, which spread you're going to use. You can use ones that are based on conflict. You can use ones that talk more about what is the future of the relationship, what are the ideals of each partner in the relationship, all kinds of different ways of laying out a spread depending on what the person is coming to you about. But universally speaking, what I would say is if you are going into a situation where you are doing readings for people and they want to know specifically about relationship situations, approach it as not giving them advice. It is, I would say, and I very rarely say the word never, but it is never a good idea to tell someone how they should handle their relationship. Because as you mentioned, there are lessons that we all have to learn. There are growth periods in a relationship. There are times when, you don't feel like you match with your partner, but that's because both of you are growing at a different rate. So if I were to do a reading and it came out very doom and gloom, I would probably tell them that this is a time of growth in your relationship, and it may be a good time to assess what brought you to this point and assess what sorts of things would bring you to a better space in your relationship. It is thereby the ball in their court to say, the way to better this relationship is to chuck it. Or the way to better this relationship is to work on it and maybe get some therapy and get down in the nitty gritty of it. You know what I mean? But you put the ball in their court.
Yeah, I
this
wholeheartedly agree that I love KRS as a YouTube astrologer that I love, and I get, even though he's a Vedic astrologer and I'm a tropical astrologer mostly, I listen to him a lot because his ethics are really great around doing relationship reading. And he says the same thing, that he will not do a marriage consultation because he believes that it's too much harm on him to tell people if someone is good for them or not. And in Indian culture, everyone goes to an astrologer to tell them whether or not their relation, not everybody, but it, like in, some communities, it is well known that they usually go to an astrologer to see if the marriage is going to work, and they arrange marriages based on their astrological chart. And so those are very strong, definitely ways of, there's a lot of opinions about that, but I take the side with you of saying that I refuse to tell people whether or not someone is the right person for them. I am come from the angle of these are possible areas of conflict that you can try to redirect the energy. And these are areas of ease and comfort and familiarity. And those are areas that could give you strength to get through some of the more difficult things. But there's a lot of great ways to channel difficult aspects in astrology and synastry. We call it synastry. So also, I really want to plug Jessica Lagnato is on Anchor, and she gets a little bit political. So if you're not into listening to politics, you might not like her. But she's very strongly opinionated with her politics on her podcast. But I love her relationship approach. I would say she's a relationship astrologer, and she caters to the LGBTQ community along with everybody. She just caters to everybody and addresses it from a very holistic mindset, as opposed to a lot of astrologers who will tell you this is the man, this is your wife, this is sometimes they'll refer, especially in Indian older or traditional astrology, they refer to Venus as a wife in a man's chart and Jupiter as the husband in a woman's chart. And in relationships now, that really doesn't apply just like so to everyone, and you should not assume that it applies to them when doing a reading, which I don't. And so there's a lot of I really highly recommend her to get a lot of good stance on maybe how to approach relationships through the chart and how to get beneficial practical ways to work on your relationship. And she always says, I don't look at the other person's chart, I look at your chart, because everything I need to know about your relationships is in your chart. And I like that. I like it. I will look at the other person's chart and I do the comparison. She does not, because she's all about self-development. She's also a social worker background, similar to myself. And so she's all about empowering someone in what they have control over, as opposed to, you know, sometimes a lot of astrologers, when they do readings, they sometimes can do a lot of like victim, like this is going to happen to you, or this is how, you know, and it's like, okay, well, this is the energy. What can we do with it? What do we have control over? What do we not have control over? You do not have control over the other person's chart. So therefore it doesn't matter what's going on in their chart. It matters what's going on in your chart.
Yeah, I think that's very true in tarot reading as well. I know when I do relationship readings, I focus a lot on what the individual who's coming to me is bringing into the relationship. And if I have the other person's like heart and subconscious mind and things like that laid out, I mention to them more in the way of like, this is potentially what they're feeling, this is potentially what they're going through, and that could be something that they're going through for a reason that completely not attached to who you are. Like, this is their stuff, this is their baggage. So don't think that automatically, like, if they have, you know, if they have some cards that are indicative of stress or something like that, I try to tell the person, don't automatically think that you are a stressful situation to them. Don't automatically think that they're stressed out about your relationship. They are dealing with stress. That's all I can tell you, because they're not in the room. I don't know what else to give you.
And there is a certain part of ethics where you're like, sometimes if someone comes to you and you're just like I've had to tell people where I'm like, I don't feel like I have consent to talk about that. You know what I mean? Like, I don't feel like that's my place to speak on the other person that is not here and is not paying me for a reading and is not. So sometimes that's a thing. And so you kind of have to choose, because, you know, some people, they don't, that they want information about what they want. And there's astrologers who will talk to them about it. I don't know how accurate it would be, but some astrologers are very accurate and they will tell you that. But I definitely have some ethical conflicts about, you know, those things. And there is perspective, and you have to approach it and keep in mind your own biases and your own stuff when you're reading also someone else's chart, because every single you can tell, like in traditional astrology, mostly men did it. I don't know where people get this idea that astrology is a woman thing. I see it on the internet that like men don't do astrology. I'm in a lot of groups and stuff, and I was like, literally men were the only ones who did astrology for a long time, or at least that was documented, right? Because there was women doing it, but they didn't get paid for it. Kind of like
Right.
cooking, like there's all these chefs that get paid for it, but like women do it in the kitchen, and cooking's associated with like women, but like we don't get paid for it. But like, I mean, at least in the stereotype world, which isn't true, but that's the same thing for astrology, where men were the ones who were writing these descriptions down. And you can tell that it was a man writing it, because the biases are embedded in those old school things and the traditions and how they were living. And when those cultural dynamics change, the archetypal properties will demonstrate that, and you have to read it according to the cultural context it is in.
Right.
And I was like, because if you're like I said, if you're reading a gay man's chart, you can't read it like he's a straight man, you know? And you can. I mean, honestly, you can just be very PC with your reading and just say in general, like, and not say, oh, this is your wife or how she would be, and just say, you know, the person, and, you know, kind of do that if you don't want to ask, or if you don't know. I wouldn't assume. But all of those
tarot readings, what I tend to do is I tell them this is a masculine energy or this is a feminine energy.
Right.
Because realistically, like I have been told that I have a little bit more, we'll say that I'm more of a 60-40 split. I'm more masculine energy than feminine energy. But so in a lot of readings, if I'm paired up with somebody who has very strong feminine energy, I'm going to come up as the masculine energy. It could be two women in the reading and still somebody who has a more feminine energy versus a more masculine energy is just going to tip the scales. Yeah, I know some women that are like, they are driven, they are type A, you're like masculine energy. You're going to come up as the emperor, you're going to come up as the king of coins.
Yeah, and that's definitely true. So in astrology, all of the signs are assigned and we have to go, but we'll just real quickly talk about feminine and masculine, and then we'll have to wrap this up. But
yeah, I was just gonna say, I'm like, I have another podcast that I have to do.
Yeah, and so but basically all the signs are assigned feminine or masculine, and so you definitely, that doesn't mean biologically female, because we all have a mixture of masculine and feminine energy. It's just the way that we so masculine is always more of a release of energy, more of a forward outward energy, and feminine energy is more receiving energy. That's why, you know, if you think of like the battery, the plus and the minus sign, right? So feminine is technically negative energy, and I hate to say that just because of all the connotations that go with negative, but that is why, is because it's receiving. It's a receiving energy, and masculine is a providing, is a giving energy. And so that's how we talk about that in astrology, but men have feminine aspects and women have masculine aspects, and all of the in-betweens. And so it is something you want to keep in mind when you're looking at your own chart or someone's chart, or cards. If you're reading cards, the same applies to the feminine and masculine, right?
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, that's why I use those terms rather than male and female or man and woman, is because it's about the energy. It's not about the physical being.
Yeah. And I think that women get a bad rap because of the negative thing, but I'm like, we need negative space. We need negative energy. We need a mixture of everything. We need balance. And so on that, we will try to balance your time and let you go. And I definitely I'm going to talk more about it on the podcast. And I think this became more of an ethics conversation than like discussing the archetypal properties, but that's okay.
Okay. We go with what we go with.
Yeah. And
all works out.
We got it on video, so we'll see how that comes out. Hopefully the audio is better. And I am currently going to check that out. And thank you for coming on. Thank you for being here. And I'll let you go.
Always a blast. I'll see you next time. Bye.